Welcome to the Call to Write chat. I am April Gardner from Write Start Fiction Studio, where we help Christian fiction writers start right, stay faithful to their calling, and finish strong. This series is all about conversations with Christian writers and the unique paths God has used to bring them to the page. We'll talk about faith, creativity, and especially calling, and the twisty, turny road to becoming a writer. Today, we have Jennifer Arrington with us. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi.
She loves books of all genres, a reader after my own heart. An outdoor enthusiast who has lived on four continents, Jennifer finds inspiration in nature and uses it as a backdrop for her stories. She has authored two women's contemporary novels and a biography, and co-writes the Apex Adventures children's series with her husband. Her books reflect her heart's goal, sharing God's love through the art of story. Jennifer, I'm excited to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be talking about calling today, but first, I've got to stop for just a second and ask what four continents?
I was born in South Africa, so
Oh,
Africa. Then when I was three, I think my parents moved to England, so the UK, Europe. And then my parents are Americans, so we would go back and forth to America. And then when my husband was a student at Texas A&M, he did research in Venezuela, so South America. So
oh,
I
wow.
lived there with him for a while. So
That's
yeah,
so
I don't know if you
cool.
can count Venezuela because I was there for 2 months, but it felt longer because we were living in the middle of nowhere with no AC, sleeping in
Absolutely.
hammocks. So
Yes, you must count it. I count
yeah,
Italy. I lived there for 6 weeks and I call it living
okay.
because
Yes,
that's what we were doing there.
yes, I'd say longer than 2 weeks.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and then I've lived in 5 states in the U United States. So,
Okay. And what
yeah.
took you overseas as a child? Were you a missionary kid?
Yes, yes. So my parents were missionaries in South Africa from the time I was born until I graduated high school there. And I actually had a South African accent until I started teaching in the US and the kids couldn't understand me. I would say, Klaus, pass your test to the front, and they would be like, what did she say? So then I would fake an American accent while I was teaching, and it just eventually bled over. And I'm a chameleon. I'll go back to England and pick up a bit. My girls are like, Mom, you sound so funny when they were little. I would pick up a little bit of it. And then when I start talking to a South African person, I'll start saying yaw again or pick up the inflection. So I'm a chameleon. So
Oh, I
yeah.
love your story. Fellow MK, fellow world traveler. Love
Where
that
did you grow
heartbeat.
up?
Well, I was actually born into the military. So, military brat
Oh,
first. So, I was born in Japan and then we moved back to the States. And then my parents surrendered to the mission field and then we moved to Spain. And that's where I grew up. And then my husband joined the military. And then we spent time overseas in Germany and England. And then I went to Italy as an exchange, not an exchange student. I was there for a semester of college,
okay.
but it wasn't an exchange student. But anyway, yes,
So we're in England, so we may have overlapped.
we might have.
My mom lives in London, so she's old now. So I go back. Uh, when my father passed away, she stayed, and so I go twice a year, check up on her.
Oh, how
Um,
fun! What a great excuse to go
yeah,
visit England. We
yeah.
were at Lakenheath, RAF Lakenheath.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
They're in London, so south of London, near Wimbledon.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. So, I mean, I could talk about that all day, but we're here to talk about calling. So,
Mhm.
as we're talking about missions and overseas, being overseas, how has that, do you think, influenced I mean, you already talked about, I saw on your website and you're in your bio, it talks about you're an outdoor enthusiast and what you love being outdoors. And like, I saw maybe was it kayaking or paddleboarding? And you put that into your stories. So, do you think that being a missionary kid and having that emphasis throughout your growing up years has affected your calling at all?
I think it really affects your perspective, because you've seen so many lifestyles, so many cultures, and it really kind of makes you view things a little bit differently. And sometimes, though, I find what I enjoy and what I like isn't really mainstream. So then, you kind of have this push and pull, like, am I writing, am I writing to market or am I writing what I love? And I've chosen just to write what I love. And
Mhm.
because if I try and force myself to write to market, I'm not being true to myself because I did have this very completely varied background. And so I find I can be more authentic if I write what I love and from those experiences.
Wonderful. Yeah, you're right. There are the two different paths. God is on each one of them, depending on which one,
Yes,
He has put
yes.
you on. So tell me that story. How did you land on your path to being a Christian writer, Christian content? Talk to us about your calling.
So I never really knew that Christian fiction existed until we were in the US when I was 15 and 16. And the church we were at had a library, and I was going through the books, and I found all the Janet Oki books. And I had read some Grace Livingston Hill. I don't know if you remember Grace
Yes.
Livingston Hill, but the Janet Oki books, I was like, this is amazing. This is like a great love story with a walk with God. And that's when I fell in love with Christian fiction. And, so back then it was really hard to find Christian fiction. And
Especially as an MK.
yes, yes. And plus there was no Kindle, there's no download the ebook. And so I read all of her books. And then we went back to South Africa and I couldn't find any more Christian fiction. So I read secular fiction. And then when I came to the US, as I got older, I would find it randomly because still Kindle did not exist. And so libraries didn't have a whole lot of it. And I'll never forget, it was all the way 2007 maybe. And I was reading a book and I put it down and I was like, I could have written something better than that. And not to be proud, but I was just like, wait, I love the Lord and I love books, surely I could write something equally that good. So that's when I wrote my first manuscript. I was a newly stay-at-home mom and I was struggling with missing my career, but I was determined to stay home. And, I found that cleaning the house when the girls were napping was very counterproductive because as soon as they woke up, it was a mess again. So I thought, why don't I do something during nap time that fulfills me? And then I thought, well, why don't I just write that book that I'm convinced I can write? And that's when I wrote my first book during the girls' nap times. And then I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know about point of view. I didn't know about, head hopping. I didn't know. I knew I liked third person, but I didn't know really. I just wrote, and I wrote the story, and then I got the book because back then you still had to like get the book and find your agents in the book. I forget what it's called. A big thick book. Maybe you remember what it
I
was called.
do. I can't remember what it's called, but I know what you're talking about.
And I went through and I sent off to probably like 25 agents. And one got back to me and said she loved this premise of the story, but the writing wasn't good enough. And I was like, the writing's not good enough? This writing is amazing. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do now because to me it was great, but it wasn't. She clearly said the writing wasn't good enough. And I didn't realize back then that whether you're going to traditionally publish or if you're going to indie publish, you've got to pay for a real legitimate editor. You can't just give it to your friends who know grammar and ask them to fix the commas.
Mhm.
And so what I did, I was praying about what to do, and I saw Angela Hunt, one of my favorite authors from that period. She has this series called Writing Sprints from the Front or Writing Sprints, and they're like little booklets, 7 little booklets. So I worked through each of them and I realized, she has one called Weasel Words, and the point of view one is amazing. And that's when I was like, oh, this writing is not good. So I went through and I edited the book according to that. And then I landed up self-publishing it through I guess what you would call a vanity press. And then right when I did that, Kindle came along. And so I reached out to them and I was like, do you mind if I take the files and just put it on Kindle? And they're like, sure, we don't mind it. I was paying for their service. And the book did quite well. I did nothing. I posted about it on Facebook a few times, but I really didn't do that much. But it was at the beginning of Kindle. And that book, then I went back to work and I would stand on my lunch break on lunch duty once a month and I'd get a report from Amazon once a month. And I'd be like, oh, sold a bunch of books. It was just pretty incredible. So then I was like, I'm going to write another book. And but I was teaching again, and teaching takes so much creativity. And I'm a very passionate teacher, and I found I couldn't be a passionate teacher and a passionate writer at the same time. So I said, okay, that phase of my life is over, and I just shelved the whole thing. I said, I wrote a book. That was a dream that actually started when I was a little girl. I had a man. I wish I could find it, but we moved too much, so that's gone. But it was a dream from like an 8-year-old little girl that I picked up in my early 30s or mid 30s actually. And then I was like, well, the dream is fulfilled. I'll probably never write another book. And I kept teaching, loved teaching. And then I got breast cancer.
Mm.
And so I had to take all this time off to recover from surgery. And I was so bored. And because I'm an outdoor person, I couldn't paddleboard. I couldn't use my arms. I couldn't, anything I loved, even walking on the beach hurt. So it was a very discouraging time. And I thought, "Ugh, if I could just think of something to do." I mean, empty time is a gift. We wish for it, but then when you get it and you don't have anything valuable to use the time up with. So what I just kept praying, Lord, what can I do with this free time? And it was like he poked me and said, well, you have that manuscript you started at the end of my first book was Trusting for Tomorrow. And I started a new book and then I just shelved it because I found I was always fighting. My creativity was like, I want to save my energy for writing, but I'm teaching. And I just felt like all my creativity needed to go towards teaching. So I pulled it out and I read what I had written 10 years before. And I was like, this is kind of good. I kind of like this. And plus, now I had learned all my what not to do with my first book. And so then I went back to teaching and everything, put the book away again. And then I got breast cancer again.
Mm.
And then this time it meant I needed the double mastectomy and I needed, um, it was going to be way more involved the second time around. So this time, oh, I'm sorry. This time I got the book out right away because I was like, I'm not going to sit around and be depressed because being inactive really, really got to me. And I worked and worked and worked on the book. And I basically wrote my first I gave my first breast cancer story to my character Heidi. And of course, I modified things, but I was like, I'm not going to waste all this experience.
Mhm.
And the thing that really made me want to write about it, because I've had some people, especially I went to one book club and one lady was actually angry that breast cancer was in the book. She's like, why would anyone want to read about this? And I said, well, before I got breast cancer, I actually read a novel where the character got breast cancer, and it actually helped me understand the emotional side because you can read blogs, but blogs are usually the worst things that happen. Normally, if people are blogging about an experience, it's because things didn't go well. So I found
Mm.
that the blogs I could find depressed me, and I wanted it to read about it in a story form. And I never have found that book that I read all those years before. So I just thought I'm going to give poor Heidi breast cancer, and I'm going to use the emotional part of it in the story, like what I went through emotionally. So I wrote my first experience into the story, and then During that time, COVID happened. So I'm going through treatments, COVID, I'm teaching online. I'm just wearing myself out. And my husband finally said, that's it, just take a year off of teaching. And so what a gift, right?
Yes.
Even though I missed my students and I missed the classroom, I focused on that book. I named it The Counting Tree. It's about God's thankfulness, and I set it in South Africa and in Jupiter, Florida. And that book I published in it came out 3 years ago. It's within months of quitting, because some of my teacher friends were like, "How did you release that so fast?" I'm like, "Well, I had been picking it up and putting it down through all my treatments, so it was a work of over 12 years, you
Mm.
know." And then after that, things just started to snowball. I have a sequel to The Counting Tree that's going to come out this year because I was like, well, I have my second breast cancer story. So do I give it to Heidi and take all my emotional experiences and just, ramp them up into a story? And so I've got the edits back from that. And in the meantime, my husband said to me, if you wrote a kid series, I could help you. We need to write like an action adventure kid series. And I was like, I don't know how to write for children. He's like, well, remember when our daughter Lauren, she's an adult now. Remember when you ran out of books for her and her reading level was so far ahead, but I couldn't let her go to the teen section because the content wasn't
Mm.
good. And he said, write stories that she would want to read. And so then we brainstormed and brainstormed, and we came up with our Apex Adventure series. And he's a contributor to it. So he gives me all that, like he's a fisherman. So I'll tell him this is where the kids are, this is what they're doing, and then I'll just record him telling the story. And so it's been our project. It's a 7 book series, and we're releasing book 6 in July.
Oh,
And then,
congratulations.
yes, thank you. And then in the meantime, so I like multiple genres. So I've already broken all the rules, right? Because that's 2 genres. And then my friend who helped me through my breast cancer had multiple cancers. She's had 6. And I wrote her story. So then I published a biography, Hope Endures. So I've now broken all the rules because that's 3 genres. But that's the beauty of indie publishing. You can
It
do
is.
that.
It
So
is. Yes. Oh,
that was a
wonderful
very
story.
long, involved answer. I hope it wasn't too long. But
No, no, it's okay. You know what? And I see God working in each one of those. And it's interesting that you're such an outdoorsy, active person, but it was in the quiet place that God was able to call you to writing and to put those words in your heart and sort of lay his hand on you to give out this message of hope because you're seeing the negativity in the blog sphere but your fiction, any religious fiction or Christian fiction, there's messages of hope in it. So if
yeah.
you had to if you had to, say that there was one message of hope in these books, what would it be? Specifically, your women's contemporary.
In my women's fiction, it would be, we kind of get the thing that, okay, here's my mountain, I'm going to climb it, and it's going to be done. And when I got breast cancer back the second time, I was like, I have to do all of that again, but more. And there
Mm,
was no illusions, you know? And so, what I try and bring about in my fiction is our life's journey isn't like, oh, here's our mountain we've got to overcome. Okay, we overcame it. Good job. We're done. Move on. A lot of it is a repetition. And, for me, especially in the sequel that I'm writing, it's her fear. Is the cancer going to come back? Her insecurity. I don't look as good as I used to. Her, feeling left out. Everyone's out there having fun and they're experiencing life, and I'm on the outside looking in. And so I want, especially with my books, to kind of bring the fact that life is life. And we often have to repeatedly go through these hard mental challenges. as we face the external problem.
Mm,
And I I don't I always write a happily ever after, but I don't like perfect characters. And I've had some people say to me, "Well, I didn't even like Heidi." I'm like, "Well, she's real." I mean, because we go through this stuff. And you might feel insecure today, and then tomorrow you're feeling better and things are going better and you're able to exercise or you're able to do all your things. And then, an illness comes back or you have to have another surgery, and then you're starting all over again. And
mm,
so I want my characters to be real. I don't want my men to be perfect who can read the character's mind. I mean, you know, I love it in a romance novel when he could tell from the dark circles under her eyes.
mm,
Well, most men aren't reading facial, they just don't. And so I want my characters to be real. And I want my readers to know that just because you got victory today doesn't mean you might struggle with the same thing
mm,
tomorrow.
mm,
And that's my biggest message, especially with the second book. And so, but you've got to balance that. You don't want it to be all down in the dumps and
mm.
and depression. So you've got to balance it with, and so the second book, I've got some elderly volunteers who are working with Heidi and to provide some comic relief. And but I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Um, your message of hope is it's something I was thinking about when I was actually in Jeremiah this morning. I've been in Jeremiah a lot. That's where my current series is really, it's Old Testament, it's that, in that time period. But I was in Jeremiah 1 this morning, reading about his calling and to the ministry. And he was young and he felt insecure about it. And God's given them this huge task. And God puts his hand on his mouth. And then he tells him what he's going to say. He's going to, over the course of he's like, gives him this summary of what you're going to do. This is the message you're going to give. And I'm like, the pressure that must have come from that. And he says, I am not capable. And God says, I am faithful to perform that in you. And that just really struck me today when we're called to give that message of hope when we go through those difficult periods in our life, like you with your breast cancer story. He called you to put that on the page for that woman out there who's looking for fiction of the exact variety that you're writing. And no, it's not for that one who didn't want to read it. It wasn't for her, was it? It was for someone else. And God is faithful to provide you the words to put that on the page, but also to give it to. And he says to Jeremiah, you're going to talk to the nations. And in the
Right,
world that we live in today, our writing touches the nations.
right,
And I don't know about you, but I receive emails from people in Africa, from Europe, South America, Mexico, from all over the world saying that the writing has touched them. And so, okay, so our writing is not, we're not prophets. It's not a
right.
prophetic
No, no, no.
message. No,
Right,
but it's purposeful. And that message that he gives us and his Holy Spirit is upon us.
right.
And he does touch us in a unique way, and he empowers us to do that and to share that message. So that's the message to our readers. What would you give? What message would you give to other authors or writers, aspiring writers who are just starting out and maybe they feel insecure? Maybe they say, I'm too young. Maybe they say, I'm too uneducated, or my writing is in that place where that agent told you, oh, it's so stinky. Is there anything in particular that you might share with someone in that position?
My biggest advice, because I have people, they're like, well, I want to write a book. And I'm like, well, write it and then rewrite it. And I'm actually weird. I love the rewriting phase because I'm like, okay, I have the story down. That's kind of like the dam broke and the story's out. And then it's the rewriting, and I'm going to make this better and better. And then you've got to pay for a good human editor.
Hmm.
Because now with the AI, AI can clean up, like Grammarly can clean up your grammar, but AI can't fix and find what a human editor can find. And so that's the most expensive part to me. And then I met someone on the plane and I could tell she was writing. And I was like, oh. I want to talk. So when we landed, I said, "Are you writing a book?" And she said, "Yes, I am." So we started talking, and I said, "The thing that you've got to do is you've got to pay a human editor before you ever send it to an agent. Because if I could go back to 2007, I would have paid a human editor, and it's expensive. That's the most expensive part. And probably if it's not expensive, I don't know. I don't know. I found an editor I love, and so I'm just going to stick with her. But it's the most expensive part of the whole process. And that's my advice to them. Write it, rewrite it again, get it as amazing as you can, and then pay an editor before you ever query anybody. Because
Fabulous advice.
what if I had gotten it edited, fixed my point of view issues and my weasel words, and then she liked it and the writing was good? Maybe my trajectory would have been different. But God doesn't make mistakes.
Mm.
And I really love my indie author lifestyle. I love to be able to switch genres if I want. So there's pros and cons to both.
Absolutely. Such sage advice because we don't know what we don't know. And that applies to
Exactly.
anything, but especially to writing because we have poured our passion and our heart into the story. We've
Yes.
lived the world. It's so vibrant in our heads, but we can't see all the flaws until
And you have
until
to have
experience.
such a thick skin.
Mm.
When I get edits back, I actually sometimes don't open them for 3 or 4 days. I have to like wait. Like I can't do this
And then
right
after you
now.
read it, you have to walk away and wait another
Yeah,
three or
yeah,
four days.
yeah, yeah. And think about it. Don't get mad. She has a point.
Yes.
But yeah,
Very good.
my number one advice is to write, and then pay an editor
Yeah.
before you move
Very
on.
good. Thank you, Jennifer. You mentioned that you have a book coming out. Is it next month?
Yes, yes. So this is our I just happen to have these sitting
Oh,
here. This is our kids series. This is our Apex Adventure kids series. Here's book one, and that's Ocean's Paradox. And they're riddle-based adventure series. And every spine has a postmark and a clue on it.
cute.
And so now here comes book so this is a review copy. And
Okay.
this is book six. And this is,
Everglades.
yeah, Everglades Mystery. So this book, and then the cover's still dull. We've changed the cover, we've brightened it. It's still the same cover. And so this book is going to come out July 14th. And so what I do is I have 13 young ARC readers, their ages 8 to 13,
Okay.
and I send them a review copy and they're reading it. And I ran into one of the little girls yesterday and she said, my reviews are going to be so boring. And I was like, oh, she didn't like it. And like I'm like, and then she goes, it just gets better and better and better. And I keep saying, and so it was lovely. I said, well, you made my day. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
that
you
was
so
so
much.
sweet. She has no idea how much how much she made your day.
I know, I know. And so then it will be a 7 book series. The goal is to have the seventh one. It's outlined and ready to go by the end of the year. And then the sequel to this is the counting tree. So the goal with the counting tree is um, this is the woman's fiction that has breast cancer in it, is to modify this cover. And then the sequel to it, I'm working on the edits right now to have
Okay.
it by the end of the year. But I just keep praying about the right timing.
Mm,
I haven't set a date for that one yet.
wonderful.
So
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing those with us. I'll make sure that we include the links to those pre-order links or to your website in the show notes so that moms who are listening can if they have birthday coming up, Christmas is a little ways off, but it's always a good time for a kid to be
summer
reading.
reading. Summary. And the books have, like, for homeschoolers on my website, I've put a workbook, companion
Oh,
workbook to go
wonderful.
with book one, and all they have to do is sign up for it. And then I'm waiting for feedback, and eventually we'll do it for all the books. But
Fabulous.
I don't want to, a mom, when she bought the book, she's like, well, I want them all right now. But I said I'm waiting for a little more feedback because I want to give them what I homeschooled for a little while. I know how you're just desperate to find easy to use material. So,
Very good. What a fabulous idea. Very good. Okay, Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your story, your heart, your breast cancer story with us, your calling story. I know that has touched me, you've inspired me in that way. And I know, breast cancer is so common. My mom is struggling with that right now too. My
So
best friend
sorry.
is. It's just everywhere. So your
One in eight.
story,
1 in 8
one in
women
eight, I
will
know. So
experience it.
your story will touch many hearts, I'm certain, and many more than it already has. So thank you
Thank
for
you so
being
much.
with us,
Thanks for
Jennifer.
having me. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.